Fujifilm's X100F is an excellent camera for enthusiasts who want the best stills possible without having to spend serious bucks on a full-frame model or a Leica. With a new higher resolution sensor, faster and better autofocus system, and a streamlined design, it hits all the right notes for manual shooting fans. It's still a solid but hefty feeling camera at over 2 pounds, which could still stand to have a slightly deeper grip. The aperture ring can now be adjusted in 1/3 stop increments, and ISO sensitivity has moved to the shutter speed dial. You lift it up and twist it in order to change sensitivity. While it's optimized for photographers who like buttons and dials and levers and whatnot, you can use it in complete auto if you want. Just set the shutter, aperture, and ISO to A. Like many a Leica, the X100F is designed so you can choose exposure settings with the camera off. Some street photographers like to be able to, somewhat ironically, simply point and shoot without looking.
Oh my God, his fur is amazing.
And video shooting is still an afterthought. It's considered a drive mode and uses the shutter button to stop and start. One of the camera's continuing highlights is the versatile viewfinder. The front lever toggles between an electronic viewfinder and a reverse Galilean optical that has an electronic overlay which displays the frame offset caused by parallax, focus areas, and other information. And all but one aspect of performance is as good as you need for this type of camera: battery life. It barely makes it through a day of shooting unless you're the type who only takes a shot every now and then. Though it's a great camera, the Nikon D7200 makes the almost 3-year-old D7100 look like a terrific deal. With only minor improvements over its predecessor, and given the D7100's lower price, the D7200 becomes a tough sell unless you're a night owl or a long burst shooter. I'm Lori Grunin, and this is the Nikon D7200. What are the updates? Some improvements in buffering for burst shooting and improved image quality above ISO 1600, plus 2 black and white high ISO modes, and time-lapse movie creation. The camera also gains wireless connectivity, but Nikon's app is one of the least capable I've seen. And while auto ISO support and a flat color profile are welcome for movie shooting, shooting video with the camera remains a trying experience. Its design is unchanged. It retains the comfortable grip and solid dust and weather sealed build quality of its predecessor. And overall, it's still a well-designed camera with a logical shooting design. The biggest drawback of having not updated the body design, though, is that we're stuck with the fixed LCD. And, for the most part, it has the 3-year-old feature set. Autofocus is excellent. In continuous shooting, it achieves up to a 90% hit rate of sufficiently in-focus photos, and that's both panning or photographing a subject that's moving towards you. Nikon added Wi-Fi to this model with tap to initiate NFC, but the company's app offers only the most basic capabilities. You can view and copy photos from the camera to your mobile device, or use your phone as a one-press remote shutter. The only control you have with the remote app is to choose your focus point. Another problem is the "I cannot believe it works this way" video controls. The camera supports manual settings, but you can't change them while you're in movie mode. To change shutter speed or aperture, you have to exit live view, make your changes, and then re-enter live view. The D7200's a great camera for the money, as long as you really don't care about anything beyond photo quality and speed. For more detail, read my review of it on CNET. I'm Lori Grunin, and this is the Sony Alpha ILCE7R, more informally referred to as the A7R. There's tons to like about this camera. It's got a 36 megapixel full-frame anti-aliasing filter-free sensor, which delivers sharp images that have a nicely broad dynamic range. JPEGs are quite usable up through ISO 1600, and if you shoot RAW, you can push it as high as ISO 6400. Really some of the best image quality I've seen in this class. Even the video looks pretty good without the artifacts I've come to expect from sensors like this. It's also very well designed, with a sturdy magnesium alloy body, a relatively large, bright, contrasty EVF, and a bright tilting LCD. The controls are reasonably customizable, with all the frequently needed settings at or near the surface. I do wish some of the buttons were more pronounced, and I dislike the feel and location of the movie record button, but they're more than made up for by controls like the auto manual focus override toggle, placement of the SD card slot on the side rather than the battery compartment, USB charging, and an exposure compensation dial, plus a grip sufficiently large for shooting with heavy A-mount lenses, and other amenities. I've got few complaints about the feature set, too. While I wish it had a built-in flash, that's frequently excluded from full-frame models. In addition to the electronic viewfinder and tilting LCD, it supports Wi-Fi with NFC, along with apps from Sony's proprietary App Store. The remote shooting app is still pretty basic, though. So what's not to like? The performance. Because it uses Sony's rather sad contrast autofocus system, it's kind of sluggish and frequently has trouble obtaining a focus lock. Like most of Sony's ILCs, it takes a relatively long time to power up, and because of the high-resolution images, there's some lag before you can make changes after shooting. And the battery life is pretty poor for a camera in its price class. I really like the camera despite its poor performance, but it does make for some profanity-filled intervals. If you want terrific photo quality and a great shooting experience in a compact model, and you're willing to carry a spare battery and you don't mind the occasional sluggishness, the A7R makes the grade. I'm Lori Grunin from CNET, and this is the Sony Alpha ILCE7R. The Nikon D3400 is a fine mix of the sublime and the ridiculous. The sublime, it delivers great photos and performance for a cheap DSLR, well suited to a family photographer or budget traveler. It can sustain a continuous shooting speed of about 5 frames per second. That's fast enough for typical kids and pets types of photos, though that's with just autofocus, no auto exposure. That means photos of someone running in and out of sun and shadow will not expose properly all the time. And the new AFP kit lens with its stepper motor is faster and quieter for shooting video and stills via the LCD and live view than Nikon's standard lenses. It's pretty light on features, but that's not unusual for a cheap DSLR. That means fixed LCD, no manual aperture and video, and overall not a lot of options. Unfortunately, I hate the viewfinder display's tiny autofocus points that don't tell you if the shot's in focus, and that you really can't see. You have to pre-focus just to see the AF points in order to get them on the subject. But the ridiculousness is the wireless. It doesn't have Wi-Fi, just low bandwidth Bluetooth, and it's limited to downloading 2 megapixel JPEGs to your phone. That's lower resolution than the typical selfie. It also geotags them and sets the clock. You can't even use it as a dumb remote shutter because that requires Wi-Fi. And on Android, the app sucks up memory and CPU cycles until you have to manually force it to quit. I had to uninstall it. In the newly reignited war over resolution in professional cameras, Sony's $3,200 A7R II weighs in at 42 megapixels. That's right between the 5DS's 50 megapixels and the D810's 36 megapixels. But the camera really doesn't need to claim highest resolution to stand out in the crowd of full-frame cameras. Its excellent photo quality, great video, including support for 4K, and its compact, comfortable design speak for themselves. I'm Lori Grunin for CNET, and this is the Sony A7R II. The sturdy, dust and weather sealed body has a big grip to help balance even heavier lenses, as well as an intelligently designed and easy to navigate control layout. I'm not fond of the somewhat mushy shutter, and I hate the flat, hard to manipulate record button, but none of these are really deal killers. You can remap almost all of the controls, which helps. Its feature set lacks nothing obvious, except perhaps a touchscreen or a second card slot. It includes essentials like pro shooting profiles for video, a huge bright electronic viewfinder, and a tilting LCD. There are a couple of photo issues like unexpected artifacts at high ISO sensitivities and some clipping and highlights, though you'll have to read my review for details on those nuances. But the issues with the stills don't seem to affect video. The camera's real weakness is performance, though calling it a weakness might overstate a bit. At 5 frames per second for continuous shooting, and with solid autofocus and processing performance, it's really in the middle of the pack for its class. Just don't try shooting sports if every shot counts. The biggest problem is battery life. You'll need at least 2 and probably more batteries to get through a day of shooting without recharging. Whether or not that matters to you is your call.